It's strange to me. Nearly always when I would watch a video on an Evangelion topic, or I would read a thread on Reddit on it, I would agree with that video or the other hardcore Eva fan. That made me get the feeling that other Eva fans seem to feel nearly the same as me about my most favorite piece of media. But there is one part of that franchise that differs just so much. The rebuilds are generally not as nearly well received as the series and the end of Evangelion in the Eva fandom, and I don't think any differently. But, and I wrote this in captions in my script for a reason, there is one part about this I don't agree with the majority. As I stated, the rebuilds aren't as well received as the series, but like episodes that are seen more positively than others, yes, I'm looking at you, Magma Diver, the movies vary in their liking as well. And here is actually where I lose my understanding of the majority of fans, because when I looked up the ratings for the 3 movies, my initial impression just got confirmed. The first movie has an audience score of 86%, which is tremendously high. 2.22 exceeds this even with 89%. But then comes 3.33 with a mere 62%. Let that sink in for a bit. Thing is, that fact didn't surprise me a bit. When people talked about these movies, I always got the impression 2.0 was the most liked one, followed by 1.0 and then 3.0. Just a quick note, I will from this point on refer to the movies with the 0.0 names. Even though they are actually the inferior versions, it's just easier to say and less time consuming, just to clear any confusion beforehand. A few years ago I called 1.0 my favorite anime movie. This came down to the simple fact that it was, and actually still is, a literal remake of the first 6 episodes from Neon Genesis Evangelion. My, as I already mentioned, favorite series of all time. Just with better animations and only 3 or 4 changes and additional scenes. In that way, I thought it would represent my favorite series as a movie in the perfect way, with no flaws. But that is exactly the problem of that movie in my opinion today, and the reason its title of favorite anime movie shifted to Akira. While it has no chance to be filled with flaws by going into a new direction like the other movies do, it is nothing of great value, because it completely copies the original. I do still like this movie, don't get me wrong. It fits in by today's standards somewhat old looking series with new visuals, while still essentially staying the same. But exactly because of that, it makes me appreciate itself and the first 6 NGE episodes much less. Because if you, like me, watch the series and the movies at least once a year, you feel like watching the events of 1.0 2 times in a row. 2.0 does this a bit differently, but in my opinion even worse. This is why I always get confused about the fact that it is the best received movie of the bunch. 2.0 starts with a completely new scene, which I actually really appreciate for what it is. But that scene introduces also a new character, Mari Makinami. And she is the literal identification of my problem with 2.0. While she is a new addition, which I already explained, I wanted new things from the rebuilds, she has no actual meaning. The cast of the movies is already too full to give them the character development they got by the much larger screen time of the show. This results in the fact that it's crucial to have back knowledge on those characters from the series, to fully appreciate their way of behaving in the movies. But the fact that Mari is completely new to the Eva universe at that point, and that she was not getting any real character development, makes her completely obsolete. Even worse, she takes away character development time other characters could have gotten and adds nothing in return. For me, it is not that devastating to not have as deep character analysis and development for Rei and Asuka because of my back knowledge about the show, which background character information is still canon unless the rebuilds actually contradict those. But for fans that get into Eva with these movies, which I actually highly disrecommend even though I did this way myself, it's just a shame to have 3 shallow robot piloting girls instead of 2 deeper explored ones, with breathtaking detail to their character. I hope you understand what I mean. But further, fans praise 2.0 for containing the overall plot of NGE up to the point of the appearance of Sarol and adding some exciting changes, but all these changes actually add nothing to the movie or Evangelion in general. For example, replacing Toji with Asuka makes Shinji's best friend completely obsolete in the reboot movies, while in the show his defeat was a heartbreaking moment. Asuka and Shinji would have had enough moments to explore their relationship even without the guilt of Shinji having her ripped apart. The same goes for Shinji's and Rei's relationship. I always kind of cringe about the particular scene at the end of the movie, where Shinji does the shonen hero trope and tries to save the girl he loves, while screaming her name. It's kind of funny that my dad, who days back watched the 3 movies with me as a kid, only remembers Shinji for screaming "Ayanami" when I mention it. This is exactly the last thing Evangelion should want the audience to remember, and I'm even ignoring the fact that Rei is half Shinji's godmother thing and half his actual mother. That knowledge makes this scene particularly weird and uncomfortable for someone who knows this background information. With those examples in mind, I always get the feeling that 2.0 is the worst of the bunch, because it is just simply half-baked. It doesn't remake the series like the first movie in a fine, exciting way, but it is also not a completely new experience like 3.0, with new things to see and to learn about the Eva universe and new ideas to be explored and brought into it. Now that I've finished the way too long introduction on why I think the first 2 movies aren't actually as great as they are received, I can now explore with you why I think the complete opposite about 3.0. The actual topic of this video. So let's start at the beginning, the intro. At the release of 3.0, the reboots started to implement the rule that they are always starting with an action scene you are thrown into without really knowing what's going on, and for some reason everyone has Mari in it. But this opening is even extra ominous. It starts with a near black screen and only begins to lighten up revealing any objects in the dark void very slowly. The fact that the viewer doesn't know where this scene actually takes place greatly underlines the moment he takes sight of the red planet and realizes the surprise of being in space. After the obligatory action scene, that I will actually talk about more in a later part of the video, we wake up in some sort of facility. Sure, we don't actually wake up ourselves, but Shinji does. While he was the main character before and we followed his view most of the time, we knew more than him about his world nearly at any moment. But that is very different this time. The bit later revealed time skip is not only great to really differentiate this movie from the original plot of NGE, but serves as a way to really put us into Shinji's shoes as well. We are confused about what happened the same way he is. We feel his uncertainty, his confusion, his anger of not being provided with any answers. We simply feel as lost as him for the first time, rather than just being spectators of the agony he goes through. But this is not the only rewarding thing for longtime fans at the beginning. There are small hidden details that are smartly integrated into the film that can only be noticed by re-watching it or if you are a former fan of the franchise. Let me give you some examples. I just recently noticed one thing from the opening scene I always just thought to be a portrait of Asuka's emotions when I recently rewatched the movie for this essay. When she screams for Shinji to also do something in the fight against the Mark IV-B, the casket containing Unit 1 breaks open a bit and immediately after that a laser beam races towards the enemy and destroys it. This happens so fast that upon first watching the movie, you would presume this laser was fired by Asuka herself, because you don't actually know what Unit 2's abilities are at that point. But by looking into the scene deeper, you actually realize that this was done by Shinji himself to save Asuka. After that, when Shinji then is reanimated on the operation table, you can see small versions of the purifier pillars connected to the table that resemble the ones Mari used to purify Paris in the 3.0 plus 1.0 preview. Though they aren't mentioned by word until 4.0, them being there shows that Anno has thought this through from the beginning. And one last neat detail I want to mention is that the thing the Wunde ship crew is getting into before their battle is actually a giant entry plug. Realizing such things after becoming an Eva fan and digging into the world and the lore is just so fun and satisfying. At this point, I want to address something. Some things I'm going to mention are somewhat like answers on statements. This comes down to the fact that I reply on things mentioned by YouTuber Xeon's Content Graveyard, who made one of the most popular videos on 3.0 called Evangelion 3.33 is bad and I hate it, stating facts why he dislikes the movie. I won't be addressing everything he brings up, since there are things I actually agree with. In addition to that, I don't hate on his video or anything likewise. In the end, his opinion is in line with the majority after all, so I'm actually in no position to. You might even check his video out to understand where I got some ideas from for this essay. But without further ado, I want to address a complaint Xeon mentions at the beginning. The fact that Misato has changed too much. She changed from an energetic, lively woman trying to take care of the kids to an ice-cold military admiral-like figure. But I would argue this development is completely understandable if you think about it. Already shown in NGE, Misato has underlying insecurities and actual grim patterns of thinking, even developing into depression after Kaji's death. She just covered that up with her facade for the sake of everyone else and not to make people lose hope. But living in a world nearly completely erased of humans for 14 years, and constantly fighting against an enemy faction has her logically obtained a much harsher personality. And Shinji being somewhat the reason for her and everyone else's circumstances, at least in their opinion, is a plausible reason to not greet Shinji with open arms. Even though she shows that there are still motherly feelings left for him, when she couldn't actually detonate his DNS choker even after she hasn't seen him for 14 years. But let's stay at the cockpit for the AAA Wonder for a short time to address one big thing I fully understand complaints about. The whole action scene of the battleship is righteously controversial. Being a love letter from Anno towards his show he made before Evangelion called Nadia and the Secret of Blue Water, rather than towards Evangelion itself, I can see why it kind of fails to organically fit into the franchise. The scene is even accompanied by a reorchestrated track from Nadia called Almighty Battleship Neo Nautilus, working as the AAA Wunder's main theme, now called the Anthem. At this point, normally the track, the anthem from Evangelion 3.33 would have played, but I've got copyright striked, so I'm instead talking over the segment. I'm really sorry. I've linked the song in the description below. This way, the scene could have been easily dropped for screen time for more character development or story. But this fully depends on the viewer, I would argue. I for myself like the scene, not only because it's an epic graphical and technical show-off, but also because the tracks playing are one of my favorite ever composed by Shiro Sakisu, and in general actually, combining choir, rock instruments and classic orchestra in such an astonishing and impressively seamless way, creating a scene I can watch without getting goosebumps. Though this is actually where my problems of the action scenes of the movies end. Let me explain. If you look at every other fight scene, you can notice something interesting. every one of them is actually two-dimensional now. The first two fights are between Willa and Neo-Nerve's defensive systems, while the last one is even more personal by being one of the few fight scenes between Ava versus Ava, and thus between actual humans. This way, all fight scenes represent personal or ideological conflict, rather than being the David versus Goliath fights of NGE 1.0 and 2.0, of humans protecting their world from big evil monsters in the form of angels. I admire those fight scenes, don't get me wrong. They bring forth emotions in the Ava pilots like fear, anxiety, uncertainty, and show the actual tremendous physical pain they sometimes have to endure. Take the fight scene of episode 3 of NGE, or its remake in 1.0 against Shamshul, for example. When I first watched this fight scene, I felt so devastated by the sheer emotional pain and pressure Shinji goes through, making him even break down in tears after its end. Fights like these show what the pressure to save the world and being hurt can do to people, nearly always underrepresented in other shows or films, where the hero effortlessly defeats the evil monster without hesitation and is always filled with hope. While shonen fights are undoubtedly inspiring and energizing, they lack a sense of reality and struggle NGE actually represents. Some angel encounters even feel more like psychological exploration and inner conflicts than exterior ones. While this is one major aspect people admire NGE so much for, that way fight scenes miss the chance to express personal conflict between characters. The only time this really happens is the fight between Kaworu and Shinji in NGE. Even the fight between Unit 3 and 1 that is infamously heartbreaking is actually no conflict between people, but more the struggle of Shinji against his morals. If there is any personal conflict in that scene, it would be between Shinji and Gendo. This is very different in every fight in 3.0. There are no angels to fight but one, and that one is even killed really fast. They don't serve as plot points or reasons to fight anymore. More important are the ideological conflicts and fights, either between the goal of Willa and Neo-Nerve, or Shinji and Rei versus Asuka and Mari. Though I prefer the psychological exploration and epicness the angel fights offer, this was a nice change and brought opportunities like never before. Besides that, I would argue every Ava fan, even if just subconsciously craved for a fight between Evangelions, to show who is the actual more skillful or powerful pilot. Besides all that, the visuals have never been as stunning before for an action scene. While NGE was obviously held back animation-wise by the time it was released while being astonishing for that exact time, and 1.0 plus 2.0 by the fact that they could only remake previous fight scenes, which were somewhat held back as I explained, 3.0 could go all out. Take the space battle opening scene for 3.0 for example. In that particular scene, the camera is turning around Unit 2 to symbolize the state of it falling down towards Earth. While the action scenes are one thing, where 3.0 really shines is its atmosphere and tone. Right after Shinji was saved or kidnapped by Rei, depending on how you see it, we follow him riding down the elevator into the geofront, resembling the similar scene from NGE or 1.0. But seeing how destroyed it is evokes not only nostalgia in the viewer, but also sadness. This grim and dark atmosphere is carried throughout the whole movie, further emphasized by its dark imagery. This consists nearly only of dark colors like red or grey. Besides that, many vague or short explanations, which the narrative is criticized for by many, actually serve well to provide an uneasy feeling of loneliness, isolation, and hopelessness, leading to further identification with Shinji's situation. One especially cruel scene is Shinji realizing that Rei of 3.0 is not the one he saved, and who opened up to him emotionally. The movie really wants you to feel the crushing cruelty of Shinji's new situation, For example, by showing his emotions when Rei quotes, "What does to like mean?" The other big aspect that supports 3.0's atmosphere is its soundtrack. I already touched this topic a bit, but let me repeat it. 3.0 soundtrack is, in my opinion, Shiro Sagisu's best work ever. And that is something noteworthy for me to say, because Sagisu is my second favorite Japanese composer behind Hiroyuki Sawano. But in this movie he overcomes his boundaries. The soundtrack is so diverse and underlines the atmosphere in such a perfect way. Melancholic music, often only composed with a single piano or two, achieves to generate sad tones, dramatic ones and even noticeably depressing ones. Take this track for example, but let me say I have no idea how to pronounce it, so excuse any failures, I'm not French. It's called Calconque 56 avec A4. The song starts with a fast up and down playing of the tone scale, conveying a picture of psychological breakdown. But besides that, Shiro Sagisu naturally uses his orchestra and most notably choir as usual. But this time nearly every track is much darker than ever before. While in Bleach and the other two rebuild movies, dramatic tracks were always implemented and their drama supported by the choir, in this movie the voices used are often only the lower ones, like bass voices. Just a quick note, while I have some knowledge of music and the technical standpoint of it, I'm no expert in any way. But still, I hope I could convey what the soundtrack makes so much darker. To support this, let me show you a comparison between battle tracks. First, Angel of Doom from 1.0, maybe the most popular track of the Evangelion movies, and Scarred and Battled from 3.0. Here I would have actually compared the songs Angel of Doom and Scarred and Battled from Evangelion 1.0 and 3.0. But again, showing these songs in full scale without me talking over it got me a copyright strike, and I can't really discuss that matter with the actual owner of the songs, so I'm again just talking over this. But you will hear Scarred and Battled in the background. Former Evangelion choir tracks are also dramatic, but they have a much more epic, hopeful and upbeat sound to it. They make you feel ready to battle, full of determination. 3.0's tracks like Scarred and Battled sound outright demoralizing, with their over-imposing loud percussion or drums and trumpets. While former orchestra tracks conveyed a feeling of hope in fighting, this time it's the complete opposite. So, after we now talked about the orchestra and such, let us take a step back for a short time and let's talk about the piano again. From promotional artwork to many scenes of the film, it gets clear that this instrument takes on a somewhat major role in the movie. What it does is that it's not only serving as a beautiful musical addition to the soundtrack, but also as an emotional and visual connection between two characters, much more subtle than words. The piano works as a connecting factor between Shinji's and Kaoru's friendship. Not only does it bring them together as friends, it drives it even further by making them sync with each other through their playthroughs so much that they are the first pilots to control a dual entry Evangelion unit. I don't really know why that is, but seeing people singing, dancing or playing a musical instrument together always touches me. I myself played the piano for several years and I always remember one particular moment. I had a teacher maybe only 6 or 7 years older than me, and on a winter evening shortly before Christmas we would perform a piece on the piano together in front of the audience. Before that I already performed alone in front of an audience, but I was more nervous than ever before. But the moment we started to play and complimented each other and would perform a music piece not possible to play alone made me feel truly emotionally connected to my teacher, and at that moment also partner. It takes a lot of trust being able to perform anything together, and it creates such a personal connection. What I wanted to express with this was that the piano scenes don't only exist for musical purposes, but as a way to really express how trusting and true Shinji and Kaoru's relationship is. This is even supported by the stark contrast of those scenes in comparison with literally anything. These are the only scenes where there is real sunlight shown, and the only place in the movie where an actual tree can be seen to have grown. Maybe this is the only major factor besides other little scenes like Under the Starlight with Shinji and Kaoru that makes me feel like this movie really achieves to portray a true friendship between the two. But watching the one episode in NGE Kaoru is actually present in, and the strong narrative and message it has at the end always makes me feel like their relationship could have used much more exploration and screen time than just 20 minutes. In Neon Genesis, the conflict that appeared for Shinji once he realized that his only friend left and the only person he actually started to truly love is an angel and would erase the whole human race if Shinji wouldn't kill him was heartbreakingly agonizing. Kaoru didn't want to do it either, because he also found true love in Shinji, but his inner angel instincts forced him to. So his last solution was to offer Shinji to kill him and prevent erasure. That decision is so difficult that the scene of Shinji having Kaoru in his Ava's hand and deciding if to do it or not lasted several minutes with just music playing in the background. Kaoru, despite being an angel, offered his life for Shinji and humanity. Keeping that in mind and the friend Shinji found in him made it so much more depressing when Shinji finally crushes Kaoru. In comparison, in 3.0 Kaoru is killed by the DNS choker, and by extent either by himself or through Willa. While you could see the scene when he takes the choker from Shinji and puts it on himself as the same decision of sacrificing his life for Shinji, it is still lacking the same narrative and emotional value, I'll admit that. I would argue Shinji didn't even realize in the movie that Kaoru actually is an angel. Kaoru mumbled something of being the 13th angel instead of the first to himself, but Shinji was way too focused on his goal and the action in Unit 13 to even realize that. They could have easily converted Kaoru's realization of being the 13th angel to the trigger for the 4th impact and thus create a similar situation where Shinji would have been forced to decide what to do to him. But still, after all, Kaoru's death serves the same purpose afterwards, both in 3.0 and NGE. Namely to have Shinji at a state where everyone he became close to either died, wasn't himself anymore, or wasn't interested in him, leaving him all alone. Furthermore, Kaoru's and Shinji's friendship was portrayed as beautiful and as deep as never before in this movie. One other character I want to talk about a bit more, who Zion also had some complaints about, is Rei Ayanami. One thing he criticized was that Rei, after becoming more open and human in 2.0, is now reduced to a soulless puppet again. While he meant that as criticism, ironically that is narrative-wise exactly who or what Rei actually is, both in the original series and the reboots. She is literally just a cloned empty shell of Yui filled with the soul of Lilith. So, as in the original series where she sacrificed herself, it's totally logical to be robotic after she just came back to life as a new Rei version. To make the audience truly realize that this is not the old Rei and to make her death really impactful, It's a genius technique to have her reduced to the shell she is in 3.0. This also makes further character development in 4.0 possible. Besides that, I already mentioned right back in the introduction that the relationship Shinji had with Rei was way too cheesy and shonen-like, and does not fit a bit into the narrative and tone of NGE, and even less into 3.0. Again, ignoring the strangeness that their somehow incestuous relationship would be if they actually kissed or something. But even if Shinji and Rei wouldn't have had this somewhat relationship, breaking their connection from 2.0 serves as another really bittersweet nod to the fact that love relationships don't always go how they do in shows, either anime or live action. They can change very abruptly, a sad but true reality. One other thing I want to mention in relation with Rei is the appearance of another Rei called Quantum Rei among fans, when 3.0 Rei is in one of the life tanks. Scenes like that were present through NGE, for example both at the beginning where Shinji sees Rei at the telephone booth before the attack of the third angel, and at the end of Evangelion when she floats above the sea. Her existence is one of the major pinpoints for the time loop theory of the EVA franchise. One of the best and coolest theories I actually know. But talking about that would just go beyond the scope of this video. I just wanted to mention that that particular scene is a great nod to not only that theory, but EVA lore in general. Now let us come to the deepest layer, the real meat, the most controversial part of this topic, and through that also of this video. Let us talk about how 3.0 differentiates itself from the original show and the questions it brings up by doing that. The starting point of most questions coming up is the moment Unit 13 enters Terminal Dogma. That moment is genius by itself, because it works as an analogy that the deepest part of Nerve is at the same time the deepest, darkest and most unexplored part of 3.0's lore. Immediately as an EVA fan, you start to wonder what the heck is going on. Lilith is down on her knees, headless and pierced by 2 freaking spears of Longinus. 2.0 brought up the existence of the Spear of Cassius, but now there are 2 Longinus lances. Inside of Lilith is Mark 6, the one exact unit Kaworu controlled in 2.0. The one unit that seemingly ended Shinji's near third impact in the after credit scene of 2.0. Still, the world is in pieces. On first sight, that is making no sense. Terminal Dogma is mentioned as being the epicenter of third impact, but clearly it wasn't in 2.0. Besides that, things didn't seem to involve Lilith in the impact at that time, nor did we see actual confrontation between her and Mark 6. But the fact that never before Anno implemented major or minor things into the story without meaning should make every EVA fan think about theories how this all could have happened, rather than simply hating on the fact that immediate answers are not available. The things happening and brought up are no minor things that could be seen as mere little mistakes. Already Neon Genesis Evangelion did definitely not provide answers on everything, and rarely at the beginning or very obviously. Several things and questions had to be puzzled together to understand the whole story. This is what Anno intended back then, and he does now. He wants the audience to get their own picture, to piece together and find out what is happening, to explore EVA's deepness. This is what formed the Evangelion community and its fanbase in its core at the first place, and why the show is so beloved. Hints are always present, and it's up to us to figure the answers out. Maybe 3.0 brings up more questions at once and is more cryptic, but theories on the internet already have had light shining on them, and there is still 3.0 plus 1.0 to give answers. All happening on screen and being cryptically mentioned hints at the fact that more has happened between the 14-year time gap than we think. And that's great, because it adds substance to the movie, and things to think and theorize about. Let me show you the genius of how the rebuilds take the original lore and turn it upside down to rip the audience of their apparent knowledge of the Eva lore, and thus making them think about its universe all again from the start. Dive into Adam's theory. In the original story, we at one point figured out the whole story about the first angel called Adam. He resides within the white moon and accidentally arrived on Earth, where already Lilith has taken residence. Both of them give life to races very different. Adam's children are massive, powerful monsters, while Lilith's children are small and fragile beings, but gifted with conscience, called Lilin, or in our language, humans. Both races can't exist on the same planet at the same time, which led to the angel attacks after Adam was formally sealed in Antarctica. We see footage of him being that giant white creature shining in bright light, and he becomes a major part of NGE's story and is crucial for the human instrumentality. Only by combining him and Lilith the project can be initialized. But we learned that more Adams and more Liliths exist in the universe, all designed to create life on different planets. Let's now consider this and actually imagine the probability of 4 Adams somehow accidentally landing on Earth instead of 1. Sounds ridiculous? Yes. But what if exactly that happened in the rebuild universe? The first big indicator is the visualization of second impact. Formerly in NGE we were shown those 2 enormous wings descending from Antarctica when Adam was awakened. But this time in the rebuild movies, to be exact in 2.0, 4 white shiny creatures are shown to us, all resembling Adam but having small little differences between them. This led to fans searching for more indicators that actually 4 Adams exist. Let me now explain that actually all 4 can be found in the rebuild movies. The first one we actually see is the creature later becoming Unit Mark 6. One of the new few elements in 1.0 is the giant creature on the moon. A big line of blood leads to the point Nerve is building a shell around it. It's stated that this line of blood resembling the one from the end of Evangelion was caused by second impact. When considering the fact that the 4 Adams are involved with second impact, it kind of makes sense that this impact led to 1 Adam being launched into space, crashing into the moon, and then sliding to the point we see Mark 6 and leaving a line of blood behind. Mark 6 having a halo and being able to seal Awakened Unit 1 also supports this theory. Besides that, he was controlled by Kaworu, Adam's human form. So this was more obvious. But where are the other Adams, I hear you cry? Well, for the second one you will have to put down the knowledge you seem to have about Unit 1. We know from Neon Genesis that unlike every other Eva, Unit 1 was a copy of Lilith rather than Adam, making that unit the conductor for human instrumentality. But what if I tell you that this is not the case in the rebuilds? Think about it. In 2.0 Unit 1 awakens just because of Shinji's sheer will. It then gains a halo, similar to the one of Mark 6 and one other example I'm going to bring up later. Besides that, it can shoot freaking laser beams and recreate an arm out of thin air, but the real indicators are these 2. For once, when Unit 1 awakens, it obviously becomes a white giant, but not only that. On its body you can see a smaller core underneath its bigger one. Where did we see that before? Right. On one of the Adams in the image. This leads to the theory that Eva 1 is not actually a Lilith clone this time. The other 2 Adams seem to appear in 3.0. Evangelion Unit 13 does also become a glowing white giant with a halo when awakened, and could only be stopped by being impaled with the spears of Longinus, just like Adam in the original series. The 4th and last one is more speculative. He doesn't have much screen time in its true form, and we never see him glowing white or awaken, unlike the other minus Mark 6 maybe. But even that Eva unit does look much more bright than the actual pitch black Mark 9. So how do I come to think of that unit as the 4th Adam? Well, for once its power is tremendous. He can survive without a head and regenerate in an abnormal speed. Besides that, he only grows a halo for a short time when he descends towards the AAA wonder at the end of 3.0. But the biggest hint is Mari calling him Adam's vessel 2 times. All these aspects lead to a pretty solid theory who the 4 Adams could be, and shift the events and possibilities of the rebuild universe. While being one of the biggest changes and theories about the rebuild universe, things like these make the new movies so much more enjoyable and provide a right for them to exist besides the original, not only as remakes but as narrative deviations. And most of such deviations and probable theories can be found in the 3rd movie. Besides deeper character moments and darker tone with more focus on atmosphere and psychology, this is exactly what was mostly absent from the other 2 movies and what made NGE the masterpiece it is. In addition, 3.0 provides the most new ideas, has stunning visuals and the best soundtrack on Evangelion movies by Shiro Sagesu yet. And this is exactly why I think Evangelion 3.0 is an underrated gem. It fills me with sadness, not only because of its narrative or because of the fact that it reminds me of a time I connected so much with Shinji and the ending song's expression that everybody eventually finds love, but because I think Anno wanted his fans to connect through Evangelion 3.33 again. He didn't provide answers on everything, because trying to find those is what formed the Evangelion community in the first place. A community that led to friendships among fans and love for a meaningful series and maybe even understanding and acceptance of oneself. The movie's theme is, besides loss and guilt, the strength of relationships, friendship, love and connection after all. And this was exactly what the movie wanted to do to the viewer in the end. Connect them. Thank you very much for staying until the very end. This was my first real video production and I hope more are going to come. While I'm a massive Evangelion fan, if you didn't notice through this video, I don't want to concentrate only on this topic. I'd rather want to make videos similar to this one, maybe sometimes shorter, on very different topics among games, shows, anime, movies and alike. But all of them are supposed to have a similar and hopefully even better standard of quality like this video, and probably a similar tone. I hope you liked this video and have maybe even gained a new perspective on Evangelion 3.33. Have a wonderful day, sayonara.